Welcome to the Agile Wire, where professional Scrum trainers Jeff Boobles and Jeff Molesky discuss Agile topics. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Boobles and Jeff Molesky.
And we are recording. All right, Mr. Boobles, kick us off, man.
All right, so this week we've got Jon Kern on the podcast with us. So Jon is one of the co-authors of the Agile Manifesto and really just a product developer. And I'm sure he's going to share a lot of stories with us about, over the last 20 years and what's happened in Agile in his mind from the day that they signed it to where we are today. So Jon, starting with that, I know you've told this story a lot, and it's been 20 years since, the Agile Manifesto signing, but what's like one thing or something that maybe has been, exaggerated or changed, or maybe our listeners wouldn't know about the Agile Manifesto signing? Maybe it's been enhanced by, stories over 20 years because, your mind changes a little bit as that happens. Anything you can share with us there that might be unique?
Well, I guess I'd like to sort of point out that nobody really thought anything like this would happen. I don't want to say that goes without saying, but it kind of should go without saying that the fact that we touched millions and millions of people's lives, was certainly not anticipated. And I think one of the most, I don't want to say unsung, but one of the most powerful aspects to me is nobody actually remembers everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a testament to the phrase I like to use is we left our egos at the door. And there were a lot of big egos in the room. There were a lot of famous people in the room. I was not one of them, but I was very vocal in the room. But that, to me, gives you a sense of the almost miraculous, 48 hours of egoless support of each other. And I'm just really happy to say that nobody actually knows what really happened and why and who. So that's a pretty powerful statement.
Mm-hmm. So kind of like that first line in the Agile Manifesto, it kind of just emerged from doing it, right? Like you didn't really set out to do this thing; it just emerged when you all got together. So that's pretty cool. So one story I've heard, and it could have been a version of truth, and I guess I'd love to validate it with you, is that when you were thinking of words for Agile, like the three words you were thinking of were Agile, responsive, and adaptive. Is that a true story, or is there something else that you guys were considering? Because the word Agile, I'm assuming it wasn't like we're going to call this thing Agile and we're going to get together, right?
No, actually, and you can find some of I think maybe on my Flickr feed and maybe on Agile Uprising. I think there's some. You can find various photographs and my notes, handwritten notes. But Alistair originally booked the conference room under the guise of lightweight methodology or something like that. So we were combating at the time heavyweight method. So of course we're the lightweight. Yep. Until Alistair, I credit him with saying something funny like, "Yeah, you know what? Nobody wants to be called a lightweight anyway. Yeah. So that's a dumb name. So we need to come up with something else." Yeah. And this is another case where I don't know if anybody necessarily knows where Agile came from, because my memory might be fuzzy. I could say, all I know is at that time I was doing Agile fighter research and enhanced fighter maneuverability, talking about fighter agility, the X-31 aircraft, post-stall maneuvers, crazy stuff. And certainly if somebody else had said the word, I would have jumped on it because it was a fascinating topic for me. I used to, admire the barn swallows around our barn about how agile they were compared to large birds, because they could immediately change their plan form. They could fold their wings back, fold their tail back and go super fast, or splay them out and make a really hard high G turn. And that's agile. And so I think that's another unknown, at least to me. I've never heard any of the co-authors recollect like who came up with that. I remember Martin Fowler saying, "How do you say it?" Because English versus American, it's a debate. But yeah, so that's a great, I don't know about the other ones might have been there adaptive, although we might have said, well, yeah, but that's the name of a process. I forget Highsmith's or Alistair's, but yeah, so I don't really remember, but that's my story.
That's the version I've heard is like, oh, we can't name it adaptive because that's, Jim's, like he's got kind of that trademarked, so we're not going to pick that one, even though that might work,
Yeah, I think
Cool.
the name actually was awesome.
Yeah,
because it says it all. Like for my work doing DoD stuff, large heavyweight processors are anything but agile. It was hard to move the ship, hard to change direction. And so to me, agile was perfect because it tries to give the connotation of being able to be nimble and move and adapt to circumstances and change direction quickly. And, small fighter plane or a small ship versus a big aircraft carrier.
So Department of Defense, right? You're working on these aerospace things, aeronautics things. How do you get away from contracts and like these are all the things you need to do? I know like you were doing that 20 years ago. I feel like people are probably still struggling with that today. How do you address that?
So as I left DoD and formed my own company, that was the last bid and proposal contract I did ever since. So that's how much I did not like that process. Matter of fact, that's what led me to I created a lightweight process, published it in some of all weird ass places, a Lotus Notes book. But that was basically my response to the heavyweight dictates of kind of like the stupidity of let's do a proposal for a year-long research and development project. Not even let's go build something that we know we want, but let's go research something, and then baked into that research is getting feedback for what we discovered and then take the next step, right? Okay, yeah, let's predict that out to the 95th percent accuracy. Well, no, that's just stupid. So we would do it, but to me dishonest is a strong word, but it's like you have to just make big stupid guesses.
I call it professionally lying.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, and so I played the game. Didn't like it, but as a taxpayer, I was like, this is wasteful. It's wasteful to do big heavyweight process. It's wasteful to have, so my joke would be, for me to be 95% accurate on building software, it's going to be about 2 weeks before I deliver it. Then I can tell you what the price, so that really was what led to my doing a lot of more lightweight, more agile, process. And then as far as the post DoD work and my relationship with proposals was, I instead, like to this day, flipped it to being open with even the prospect. Like I'm very open with the prospect as if there's things that I feel are too risky for both parties, I try to break it down into, well, let's agree to some smaller amount of work, so that we can build up that comfort level, because you only think you know what you want. I remember turning down a former DoD customer who also went into the private sector. He's working for Nielsen Ratings, and he wanted my because we had like a boutique engineering consulting firm that did software, and he liked us, and he virtually demanded I bid on it, and I kept no bidding it. And I was like, no, you only think it was a big detailed spec, just like we did in DoD, right? I'm like, dude, have you learned nothing? Evidently not. But no, I'm not going to bid on it. I'll do it a different way with you. Mm-hmm. I'll help you, figure out the right way to go. But I'm not, because I'll either have to lie and overbid it so much so I don't lose my shirt, and that's not fair to you, or vice versa. I'll try to bid it right, and then you'll change your mind because you won't know it until you see it. Yeah. So anyway, that's how I've gone, ever since then, is try to work around basically time boxing and not to exceed, but come up with a better way to build a rapport than a stupid giant. Again, certain things, if you've done 10 of them and if someone's asking you to bid on the 11th, that's okay. But when I'm talking about completely large, year-long projects with 20 people and a real fuzzy idea about we could do this really cool thing, I just approach it, try to ballpark it, say, well, it looks like it could be like this, but that's a crapshoot. So I've just basically, if you imagine being in the DoD bid and proposal world, and then you go back and look at the 4 bullets, you'll see where, like I said, I was not quiet in the room because there's a lot of things that were really important to me from my experiences of doing heavyweight process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you mentioned like a do not exceed for building structures, and I'm just curious because Jeff and I come from that world. I think we had a fairly advanced isn't the right word, but we very, very rarely did those fixed bid contract work like you're talking about. And we had just an iterative billing structure where it was like, hey, yep, we think this thing is going to be 6 to 9 months for us to build, but we're going to bill you every 2 weeks. And you give us 30 days notice. And if we're not meeting your expectations, then we just walk away from each other. And so long as the thing that we are building, every 2 weeks, we send you a bill for $20,000 or whatever it is. As long as we're producing more value than you're paying, cool, let's keep going until we either run out of work or we've achieved the goal with you, or that 30 days notice like I was talking about. And that's pretty much how we constructed the majority of our contracts. I'm just kind of curious if that's something in line with your approach. It is.
Yeah. So the way that, it was TNA, it was still time and materials. One of what's funny is one of the world's top high performance automobile manufacturers, without naming names, I ended up speaking. Well, the proposal and went to the head of commercials or whatever they were called, but the very top guy who does all of the contracts and all the that kind of thing. And he read, like for some odd reason, he puked all over the proposal, red line stuff, actually deleted things that were kind of really important, and was like completely flat out against the time and materials anything fuzzy like that. So I didn't overreact. I'm like, all right, he's coming from a certain place. We just need to have a conversation. It's pretty gutsy that you actually deleted parts of the proposal that weren't even about cost. That was the most miraculous. Like, all right, that's pretty ballsy. But anyway, I'm not going to overreact. And so we had a conversation, explained to him how we work, like what you're describing. Because it's all contracts only matter when the poop hits the fan, right?
Yeah.
If it's more about building that rapport, right? It's individuals and and interactions over documentation and contracts and all that other stuff. And once we kind of gave him the assurance that a bit of the not to exceed and it's time and materials and the way that we work is by time boxing stuff. So that's a strategy, even if you're developing, knowing the definition of done, because, you could polish something out to the nth degree, no matter what. So there's a skill around time boxing stuff to get enough value. And he ended up approving because he said, this is the first time I've ever, I also said something like, and we won't even spend all the money if we don't have to. Because, it's about trying to do the right thing for you at the right value. And I think he said something like, well, you're the first vendor that ever said that in my life. So to me, it's I guess if you have to dance the dance, but the professional lie, I just feels dirty, and I'd rather be honest and try to work with people who also have that shared feeling. And that's why it's the best opportunity when I would not do complete, get a complete job at once. It would be all right, if you want to get this a little more refined, let's do some T&M up front. And so that we'll work together so that you can see where we're going, how it works. I can help, do risk mitigation for all of us. And then there's a certain point where either we just keep going or you say, all right, let's bid out the rest. But they never do. It's always, all right, let's just keep going. So,
Yep. Yeah, we've had very similar experiences when Jeff and I were on that side of things, where it would be like a small team. Let's do some general discovery, get some little things out there. And then, yeah, we can scale up a little bit if we need to, maybe actually, have a more full size team or something. But like, let's decide that when we get there, if you don't like, how fast we're moving now, or, you want to spend more money quicker to get the results sooner. But like very often they wanted to say, look, let's get 3 or 4 teams going, like let's dive into this. And you're like, we don't need 3 or 4 teams. We need like half a team right now to like just even see if there's anything worth doing here first, and sometimes it's about helping them not hurt themselves, and now that I'm on the other side of the fence and I'm usually working with companies and they're hiring vendors at times to help them, that's usually a general conversation that we have to have. Like your vendor is likely to be your bottleneck on your agility, and you're not gonna be able to change directions very quickly if you paint yourself into a corner with your contracting. And so I guess anybody that's going out there hiring a vendor, like do some vetting, make sure you actually have an agile vendor, because a lot of them will say that, but the first step is let's do a design sprint, let's do a little bit more analysis sprint, let's do some architectural sprints, let's do some development sprint, let's do a testing sprint, and things like that. And all of a sudden it's months later, 6 months later, and we haven't even seen anything working yet.
Yeah, that's not cool. Right. Yeah, as a matter of fact, in 1995, the reason I was able to form my first company was ended up getting a contract we were a subcontractor to the prime, but we were the reason that we got the work. But it was to produce IBM's next generation manufacturing execution software to replace what they called factory operations executive. And there was a point where we're doing, there's a bit of a just enough up front. Like I'm a big proponent of kind of getting a lay of the land, the landscape. What is it we're building? And an MES system, I think, is 7 major modules. Anyway, it ended up being like 300 problem domain classes, a few million lines of C++ code, so it ended up being a 3-year, pretty big project. But the point was, there was early on, they were like, all right, we're going to unleash 20 developers on your team. They had some H-1B visa folks. And I'm like, well, we're not quite ready yet, because we actually were building the bones, and we're basically building, like within the first, it wasn't too long, but we had servers up and running. We kind of had it needed to run in a thin client, disconnected, so it's pretty advanced. It needed to support 2 databases, Oracle and DBM, UDB, or whatever the heck IBM was, DB2 type thing. And it had to do NT OS2, remember that? And maybe even DOS, I forget. So it's pretty advanced design, pretty advanced architecture. Built something that looks a lot like maybe a Rails type lightweight framework for, you hold up the different domain models, and everything looks, there's just blurry things where the names are, but there's a lot of that kind of thing. And so we were building it out, getting the ability to deploy and all that stuff, and still kind of refining some of the initial bits of the requirements to enough level. And I said, well, if you bring them in, they're just going to sit in that room over there. I'm not letting them write code. What? No, we're not quite ready. Give me a couple more weeks. That kind of, because if they sit down and start, they're going to write code. Whether we've got things in place where, because I'm all about consistency and trying to use your energy and your creativity where it's putting smiles on customers' faces, not on weird ass stuff that I want to turn into boilerplate, frameworky type stuff. So anyway, yeah, I'm with you on it's sometimes people. I'm working with a client that has some offshore teams that they've radically scaled those up, but the product management side of the house feels overwhelmed because there's not enough of them to keep up. And the contract structures, probably they're going to write code, whether they're going to bill they're expecting that they got a contract and and I'm sure they're just billing whether they're, as effective as it could be or not.
Yep.
And you're right, that can be, you're playing now you're racing against time, like to stop the presses from generating scrap.
So I got a question for you, because this is something I get asked a lot when, I'm training Scrum or whatever else. And I have a way that I answer it, but I'd love to hear the way you answer, Jen. And it's kind of related to what we just were talking about. So it's number 10 on the principles. And it's the art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. Actually, the first word is simplicity. Sorry, I forgot that. Simplicity, the art of maximizing the work of not done is essential. What does that mean to you? And did we just talk about what that means? I guess is my question.
It was probably in there. Yeah. I kind of start off with one of the, I'll say something like mind the gap. The most easiest way to think about Agile is reducing the gap in time between doing something and getting feedback. So that means small is powerful. And, I often will say, like, whether it's at the feature level, whether it's at even the idea for the product, at every level, a lot of what I practice is done recursively, kind of, a lot of it just applies no matter what level you're at. So for me, I think of it from the point of view of, what if it's a feature, think about, number one, understand the level above the feature that you're doing so you can kind of be smarter about the context and potentially figure out what you think you need to do to provide a solution, and then maybe do a little bit less. So I'll often shock people by how sometimes almost stupidly simple I might produce something for the start of a new feature. Hey, we would like a document brochure library that our engineering contractors can download, different blueprints and construction diagrams and stuff like that for these, really expensive pumps that we produce. And then we need to be able to upload to it. And it was replacing an internal system. And the very first iteration of the library, after about 2 weeks, a little bit of design, a little bit of talking back and forth to customers. So, it's a pretty trivial thing. Can I upload PDFs? Can I upload, CAD drawings? Was a single level, and this is for a SaaS app, but I was just working with the first client, just a single level library, right? A single list, which of course the actual design was, no, you'll actually be able to categorize, you'll be able to search, you'll be able to use, but the very first go was the most stupidly simple version of, and of course they're going to ask for the next features, which would be, hey, yeah, so do you think maybe we can put them in folders, or like every library I go in isn't just a big pile, one big stack of books. There's different ways to sort it or find, all the normal stuff that anybody could come up with. But I like to use that as a radical illustration of, there's an example of doing something way less than ultimately is needed, but still I got feedback. I got to see if they're uploading it. I mean, it begins the process in a very humble manner. And to me, that's really important, to treat much of what we do as a hypothesis and be very humble, and don't think what and just test it. And so, yeah, I'm all about trying not to overbuild, and so many problems occur because of siloed organizations that do the upfront design work, and upfront, some group is doing the business value, and some group is going to architect and design it and do the UX, and then the UX gets, so I'll do UX, but a lot of times it's for the ultimate vision, and it's just kind of thinking about it, maybe some balsamic mock-ups, but then you have to break it down into, well, can I just do part of it? Can I get something out the door with a little bit? But so often when those siloed orgs, nope, that big giant, it's like waterfall. That big giant design hits the devs, and it's giant stories, and they got to do it all. There's no sense of, to me, you just missed an opportunity to have a conversation with the business, the UX, the dev, QA about, all right, let's negotiate. Maybe there's an 80-20. I almost guarantee it. Maybe we can do 20% of that work and get 80% of your business value, or there's opportunities to say that, Well, yeah, that UX design, that we don't have a control. Angular doesn't do that.
Yep.
So would this work? And some organizations don't have those conversations, and they actually go off and build exactly what's, and the classic silo can be so wasteful, so inefficient, and they're mistaking activity for progress. So doing less can be powerful. But I don't know, it's so hard. It seems so obvious to me, but not to a lot of other people apparently.
Yeah, it's like if we were to reword it, maybe increase the timing for feedback, or favor feedback over analysis might be another way to reframe it, right? Like if we were going to use, more of the values.
Right.
Yeah, I like that. It's good.
You just mentioned something inside of there, and mistaking activity for output. And I feel like that's common is the word that's coming to my head, but prolific, I think, is more what I'm going after. Like, it's just so easy to see, look at all of this activity. Everybody is so busy. Like, this is what work is supposed to be about. But completely losing sight of the fact that we haven't gotten anything to a customer in months, quarters, years, maybe even sometimes, right? And this goes right back to what we were talking about earlier with the contracting work. Was you had brought up, individuals and interactions. It's all about the people, and I do believe in that. You said something else inside of there that I thought was really key, though, was people only care about the contract when shit hits the fan, right? When things are going poorly, that's where we pull out the contract and right here, this is, you said you were going to deliver this, right? But if you can get to a cadence with your customers, whether you're consulting or an end customer, where you're just delivering something every few days, every few weeks, whatever that happens to be, like, for better or worse, it's okay. This is totally not what I want. It's not meeting my expectations. Come back to me in 2 weeks with something better, right? Like, it's so easy to build on top of that once you're interacting. And I think that's exactly with what you were just talking about earlier. So it just, I don't know, there's a lot of great stuff in there that I feel is almost subtly overlooked, but really impactful once you know to start looking for it. Are we actually getting things done? Are we closing that feedback loop?
Yeah, and when I work with teams or my teams, it's we really try to emphasize. I've changed probably over the past 10 years from I would, since I kind of learned feature driven development, and learned that a feature by definition in my world is a client valued piece of work. So of course, if I'm measuring features going out the door, implicitly they have value, because that's how I define it. There's no such thing as a feature that deals with technical debt. Like, I see that kind of crap and I'm like, ugh, give me a break. I mean, if it gets to that point, all right, call it a task. It ain't a feature. But I have switched to being exceedingly overt about what outcomes do I expect to achieve. If we build this, I mean, some are simple, like, hey, do you think we can add a registration system so that our distributors can offer more intimacy with their customers to if they register, blah blah blah. Like, sure. So that's something easy, because the expected outcome is, I don't know, registered users. So that's pretty easy to measure that. And there's other things like, so I would actually, and I use very simple Confluence and Jira in an extremely simplistic manner. So I know people bitch about it, but it ain't the tool's fault. Like I used to always say, the fool with the tool is still a fool. You can give me all my dad's great woodworking tools, and I'm not going to make musical instruments or furniture like he can. But you have all the tools, and I even have his process. Measure twice, cut once. So I know, but I still can't achieve the masterpiece. So anyway, I guess the tendencies that I've adopted over like 5 to 10 years is to stick into roadmappy things and Confluence. So just a real high level, just and this also works on a board. So just big high level index cards that might be the business wants this kind of chunk of work and this chunk of work. Cool. So we can prioritize those over time. But as something grows up to the top of the stack and that roadmappy thing, you start to put a little more, maybe so you have to architect it. Maybe it's a brand new thing. Maybe it's you got to extend your model. You got to do some UI work. You got to get a little more granular about the features, maybe do some. So the idea is as things go from an idea, there's almost no expense to writing a paragraph in a document. There's a little more expense as we do enough design work to bat around ideas and maybe enough mock-ups to get started and to get some feedback from the customer. But I always couch it in terms of it starts as expected outcomes, then that slot on the wiki starts not turning into a table, because you can pull it, like I usually use epics or something like that. So the epics might have 20 stories to push out this new feature. And I'm happy to do version 1, version 2, version 3 too. You don't have to do it all. Just what are the heaviest hitting things can we get out the door to potentially start seeing if we can get these outcomes. And then it flips from showing the status so that, the poor stakeholders don't have to suffer trying to find, the best I got is, well, you can see your little epic colors in Jira. So you know that you want this purple thing for your roadmap, and you can see purple stuff is on our board. You can be happy the teams are working on your purple stuff. But here, just keep looking at this. This table says we're 15 out of 20 done. And then once it hits production, it flips to, now it shows actual tracking, because every opportunity I get, I build as part of the system the ability to track itself. So, sometimes it's easy because there's you want to know users. All right, there's actual entities in the database. So you can track stuff like that. Other times it might be usage or other stuff. And I would just build a single API call that the developer would know to stick in there, and boom, throw up data to the business, to a little collector in the sky. And then there would be a dashboard for super admins to see. I could tell you, did anybody use that library I talked about? Shit, yeah. Right. And you can just see so that's the level of walking the walk or walking the talk, or whatever the phrase should be, where I talk about caring about outcomes, caring about value, and then closing the loop, right? Having a feedback loop that actually shows you then, see that we've actually got stuff happening, or if not, try to figure out why. Is it marketing? Is it's buried? Why isn't something showing up? But anyway, that's the level to which I've kind of changed my ways to care deeply about outcomes, and to the point of actually building in measurements.
And it sounds like you've added science back into computer science. Like, you're actually running experiments. You think these outcomes are going to happen, and then we're going to drive to running that experiment, and then we're going to validate it, which I think is awesome, because we're not in the simple domain. We're not cranking out widgets optimizing for things of economies of scale. We should be optimizing for economies of learning, which is kind of what we were talking about earlier. Like, we should try to learn as fast as we can with rapid feedback. Like, that's the whole Agile approach, so we can change directions when we figure out the right path. So, John, I know we're almost at our time box here. Is there anything you want to plug or promote? One thing, I wanted to ask you about, we didn't get to, is your firefighting app. I wanted to learn a little bit more about that. I know that's a passion project of yours.
Yeah. And I love it. I get great NPS scores, except yesterday, I think I got a 0. And in the question, it says, what could we do to improve? And it said everything.
Oh boy. I'm
like, ouch. and mind you, typically we're 8, 9s, and 10s, right? Very rarely, but I'm like, all right, this guy's in one of our largest, Texas, 17 station fire company. They're a pretty big, customer. Even though I'm a Philadelphia Eagles fan, I hide that when I'm down there. but yeah, so I reached out to him. I said, "Ouch, but thank you. Can you I wanted to say, throw me a bone, dude. Everything that's not are you having trouble performance? Because sometimes they're in some, believe it or not, some horrible cell coverage areas. So that I can't help that. I guess I could try to make it lighter weight, but anyway." He did reply, and he said, "Look, I'm sorry. I apologize. I was, I'm an older firefighter. I'm frustrated by technology sometimes. I'm not that tech savvy. Yesterday morning, I was in a mood. Or I said this morning, I was in a mood. A lot of things were popping up at me, and I was just trying to get, and that came up, and you just caught me on a bad day. So he apologized for it, but I gave him some tips. I looked, he actually had, he didn't switch his timeout, so he was timing out every hour. They do 24-hour shifts, so we always told people to, you really should bump that up to like, at least 1,400, 1,500 minutes, so that because that's a pain in the ass. If you're on a call and you expect it to be ready, and you click and boom, you have to log in, and you're bouncing down. So I can imagine, so what I did was I actually deployed this morning. I shoved the user's timeout into intercom, so now I can write some reminders to folks, just to say, hey, don't forget about, you could set your timeout for folks who have a timeout that's low. So I'm using the feedback, and then I deleted the 0 response, so it doesn't show up in our database. But I felt okay deleting that because
you'd had a conversation with the user, and then you did something about it. So
right,
that's great.
And I showed him the help message about how to set his timeout, and I'll kind of look, if he doesn't do it, I might just do it for him. And then and I also offered a WebEx to see if he mentioned he had some problems, maybe finding some stuff in the search. So anyway, the beauty of that app is it's helping people save lives in buildings, and it's that level of just really honest. They're the best customers I've ever had. They don't beat around the bush, right? Like they're a dream. So I've been doing that on the side since like middle 2000s, So, but it is dreamy. And someday it'll be maybe big enough that we'll go further. But we do have all kinds of cool clients, from big pharma to small rural fire departments to up in Saskatchewan to, so it's kind of fascinating, the breadth of UX. I want like a lever for UX, it's a really fascinating problem domain, from SWAT to fire, it's radically different. But yeah, and I'd be happy to talk more. So, we could ping another slot if you wanted, and you could butt them together, because there's more that I'd like to talk about, some of the cool things we're doing around Agile mindset and kind of my discovery about human, kind of what's called vertical development, sort of adult psychology. Now I'm starting to realize why sometimes I would say things to a team and we talk about stuff and it'd be spectacular. In other teams, it would fall flat, and I've started to learn that the different mindsets will receive the same message different ways. And, it takes a while to kind of build the cultural muscles to be able to have the kind of the right conversations at the right time in different individuals, kind of their own journey. Yes. So we run into a lot of experts in our industry who nailed on. We just need to tell them more. They just need, put more in that process diagram. I'm sure if we gave them much more detail, if they only did what I told, all that, I'm learning more how to deal with people like that, because they don't even understand that. Yeah. All the other people that you're shouting at,
not getting it.
Yeah. They're not. Yeah. It's command and control versus, autonomy. And anyway, I'd love to.
Yeah. Let's get that in our next episode.
Thank you for listening to the Agile Wire. We are consistently inspecting and adapting ourselves. We would appreciate feedback at feedback@theagilewire.com or on iTunes, Spotify, or Google Play Store. See you next time.